Alright guys, I'm going to run through Firestarters 26, 27, 28, and 29. All of these are going to use our quadratic formula, so remember, if you don't remember, the quadratic formula is right here. Remember, you have to find A, B, and C. It must equal 0. If it does not equal 0, right here, it must equal to 0. You always have to do that first. Alright? So like example A, we are not equal to 0, so the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything is I'm going to add n squared to both sides. Really, if you wanted to, which I would not recommend, but you could move everything from the left side over to the right side. So I'm going to have 9n squared plus 4n minus 16 all equals 0. Now I'm going to find A, B, and C. So A is 9, B is 4, C is negative 16. I don't know why I wrote negative 14. Now, I'm going to write this formula. I'm going to write this formula right here. I'm going to write the entire thing, but instead of writing letters, I'm going to write parentheses. I think this is the best way to do it. X equals the opposite of B, plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. So A is 9. So wherever I see A, so that's going to be next to the 4 and next to the 2. B is 4, so I put 4 in the first set of parentheses, second set of parentheses, and C is negative 16, so I put negative 16 there. Now remember, inside the radical is called the discriminant. So this right here is called the discriminant. That's the only thing I plug into my calculator. So I have x equals negative 4 plus or minus. I don't press the radical button. I do not press plus or minus. There is no plus or minus button in the calculator. In my calculator, I only type in the discriminant, which is left parentheses 4, close the parentheses, squared, minus 4, left parentheses 9, close the parentheses, left parentheses negative 16, close the parentheses. The common mistakes I'll see here is somebody's going to mess up and they're going to use the negative sign there instead of the minus symbol. They're going to forget the parentheses before the little 2. I do that, I end up with 592. Now, I don't know if 592 is perfect, so I'm going to check. I'm going to put in my calculator, square root of 592. It is not perfect, right? Not perfect. So I have to find a number on my list that goes into 592. Now, there are multiple perfect numbers that go into 592, but 16 is the biggest. 4 also works. No, not 4. So I do 592 divided by 16, I get 37. That means 16 times 37 is 592. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus this 16 turns into this 4 right here. All over 37 goes in the jail. All over 18. Now, the only thing I can do more is all three of these pieces, this guy, and this guy, can divide it by 2. So my best answer is x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2 radical 37 all over 9. And I just leave it like that. You could write it as 2 separate answers, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it just like that. And then, because the radical did not disappear. Alright, B, I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So I end up with 8n squared plus 7n minus 8 equals 0. A is 8, B is 7, C is negative 8. X equals the opposite of B, plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. Now, A, 8 goes next to the 4 and next to the 2. B is 7. It goes in the parentheses, first and second set of parentheses. C is negative 8. Now remember, I have x equals the opposite of 7 is negative 7 plus or minus. I just write square root because I'm going to plug in the discriminant into my calculator. All over 16. So remember, the discriminant is what's inside the radical. That's left parentheses 7, then it close parentheses squared, minus 4, left parentheses 8, close parentheses, negative 8, close parentheses. I get 305. So I have to find out if there's a perfect square that goes into 305. So I got to use that list of numbers, all those perfect numbers. So I have to use that. So I use that list, and none of those blue numbers go into 305. So we are completely done. 305. That is your answer right there. If 305 could have been broken down, then we would have went further. Remember, we don't have to write it. You could write it twice. You could write this. This is optional. You could say -7 plus square root of 305 all over 16, and x equals -7 minus radical 305 all over 16. But if the radical stays, you do not need to do that, in my opinion. All right. C, exact same concept. I like my n squared term right here being positive, so I'm going to -4 and -7n. You didn't have to do it that way. That's just what I did. You could have moved the 9 squared, had a negative a. That's fine either way. So I wrote 9n squared minus 7n minus 4 equals 0. So a is 9, b is -7, c is -4. I say x equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now I'm just going to plug it in. So wherever I see an a, I put 9. So 9 goes next to the 4 and next to the 2. b, -7, goes here and here, the first set of parentheses and the second set of parentheses. c is -4, goes right there. Now I have x equals the opposite. The opposite of -7 is +7. Plus or minus, I write the radical all over 2 times 9 is 18. So in my calculator, I'm going to type in left parentheses, -7. It's important that you close the parentheses before you hit the square button. -4, left parentheses, 9, close parentheses, then -4, close parentheses. I end up with 193. 193 cannot be broken down. We are done. That's it for Firestarter 26. All right, Firestarter 27. I'm going to do everything exactly the same that we've been doing before. Remember, it has to equal 0. So the first thing I'm going to do on a is I'm going to -80 from both sides. Remember, those are not like terms. You cannot combine them, so it just becomes 5r squared minus 80 equals 0. Now here it's important to remember that a is always next to the x squared, b is always next to the x, and c is always the number by itself. So when I find a, b, and c here, a is 5, b is 0 because there is no r to the first power, and c is -80. The most common mistake here is somebody messes up and says b is -80 or b is 1. So that is the correct a, b, and c. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now I'm going to go through. Wherever I see an a, I'm going to put 5. So 5 goes next to the 4, and it's going to go next to the 2. B is going to go in the first set of parentheses and the second set of parentheses. C goes in the last set of parentheses. So remember, every single time we do it exactly the same. X equals the opposite of 0 is just 0 plus or minus square root, and inside the radical I'm going to do in my calculator. So I'm going to do the left parentheses. You don't have to do your calculator. You could do 0 squared and then do it all without using a calculator. You could, but it's easier for you guys to use a calculator. 0 squared minus 4 times 5 times -80. I end up with 1,600. Now I'm going to check and make sure 1,600 is not perfect, but it is perfect. So this is perfect. So I square root 1,600 and I get 40. So my next answer is x equals 0 plus or minus 40 all over 10. Since the radical disappeared, I have to say x equals 40 over 10. So x equals 4, and x equals -40 over 10. X equals -4. So if the radical disappears, you do have to write it as two separate answers. All right. So if the radical does not disappear, then you don't have to write it as two separate answers. B, exact same concept. I'm going to add 7 to both sides to start. Remember, 7's not like terms with any of that stuff there, so I have 2k squared plus 9k plus 7 equals 0. So A is 2, B is 9, C is 7. X equals the opposite of B, plus or minus B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. I'll plug it in. A is 2, so it goes next to the 4 and the 2. B is 9, so it goes in the first and the second set. C is negative 7, it goes in the last set. X equals negative 9 plus or minus. Remember, I just put the radical. I cannot put plus or minus in my calculator. I cannot put the radical button in my calculator because in case it doesn't work. So I do left parentheses 9 close parentheses squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7, 137. And 137 cannot be broken down, so I am done. Negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 137 all over 4. Done. I do not have to write that one separately, even though it is 2 answers, because the radical still is there. And I did check and see if 137, if any of these blue numbers here could go into it, and it can't. So C, I minus x from both sides. I get 2x squared minus x minus 36 equals 0. Now, A is 2, B is negative 1, C is negative 36. Remember, I want to see this step every single time. I want to see you actually write out A, B, and C. X equals the opposite of B, plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A. And I just write empty set parentheses. A is 2, so I put 2 next to the 4 and the A. B is negative 1, so I put negative 1 in the first and the second set. C is negative 36. Now I just start to simplify. Remember, I just do the opposite negative 1 is 1, plus or minus radical, because I haven't done that part in the calculator yet, all over 4. So in my calculator, I type in left parentheses negative 1, then I close the parentheses before I hit the square button. Minus 4, left parentheses 2, close the parentheses, negative 36. I end up with 289, which is perfect. It's perfect. So this becomes x equals 1 plus or minus 17, not in the radical. I still see a lot of people, when they have a perfect number, they want to leave that guy in the radical. Remember, if it's perfect, it leaves the radical is gone. So because the radical disappeared, I do have to split this. X equals 1 plus 17, then divided by 4, and x equals 1 minus 17, then divided by 4. 1 minus 17 is negative 16 over 4, so x equals negative 4. It's a little bit neater. 1 plus 17 is 18, so it's 18 over 14. I'm sorry, over 4. I don't know why I wrote that 14 there. Which is going to become x equals 9 over 2. So x equals 9 halves, x equals negative 4. The other right is 2 separate answers because the radical disappeared. 28 and 29, exact same concept. This one just has a lot more stuff to move. So I'm going to move everything to the right because, and this is just my personal preference, I like my k squared to be positive. I like my a term to be positive. It's just what my brain likes. So you could move everything from the left side over to the right. It does not matter. That is fine. So I'm going to end up with 4k squared. That's these two. Nothing. Minus 2k plus 2k minus 25 equals 0. So now I'm going to find a, b, and c. Remember, a is always with the k squared. That's why a is 4. B is always with the x. So that's why b is 0 in this problem. And c is always the number by itself. That's why c is negative 25. So I write my formula. Remember, write it with that empty set of parentheses. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. A is 4. So I put 4 next to the 4 and the 2. B is 0. So I put 0 in the first and the second set. C is negative 25, so I put negative 25 in the last set of parentheses. So x equals 0 plus or minus square root all over 8. In my calculator, I'm typing left parentheses 0 squared minus 4 times negative 25. I get 400. What we find out is 400 is perfect. So if you didn't see this list from before, 400 is on the list right there. So that means this whole thing turns into x equals the 0 plus or minus anything is whatever you're plus or minusing, so it's just 20 with the plus or minus in front all over 8. So because the radical disappeared, I do have to do 20 over 8 and negative 20 over 8. So x equals 20 over 8 is the same thing as positive 5 halves, and negative 20 over 8 is negative 5 halves. Those are your two separate answers. Alright, B, exact same concept. I just minus 5 from both sides. I end up with 2x squared minus 3x minus 20 equals 0. The key word is almost done. Almost done. Now I'm going to find A, B, and C. A is 2, B is negative 3, C is negative 20. Write my formula. X equals the opposite of B, parentheses, plus or minus B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So A is 2, so I put 2 next to 4 and 2 next to 2. B is negative 3, so I put negative 3 in the first set and the second set. And C is negative 20, put it there. X equals the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3, plus or minus radical all over 4. So really, this is all the exact same step-by-step process. Negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 20, close parentheses, 169. 169 is on my list, right there. So x equals 3 plus or minus 13 all over 4. Because the radical disappeared, remember I do have to write it as two separate answers. So I say x equals 3 plus 13 all over 4, which is 16 over 4. So x equals positive 4. Then I have x equals 3 minus 13 all over 4, which is negative 10 all over 4. So then x also equals negative 5 halves. Two answers because the radical disappeared. Alright, last one. This concept is exactly the same. I'm going to minus 6m squared from both sides. Minus 7m from both sides. I end up with x equals 14 minus 6m squared is 8m squared minus 7m plus 1 equals 0. I don't know why I wrote x equals. That was stupid. Do not write x equals there. That doesn't make any sense. I skipped this. My brain went. I was thinking ahead. A equals 8. B equals negative 7. C equals 1. Now I write x equals. Or you can write m equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now a is 8, so I put 8 next to the 4, I put 8 next to the 2. B is negative 7, I put in the first set and the second set. C is 1, I put in the last set. I write my simplified version. If you write x equals instead of m equals, that's totally fine. I do it all the time. 7 plus or minus square root all over 16. So in my calculator, like I said, it's really important that you put negative 7 inside the parentheses before you hit the little square button. Minus 4 times 8 times 1. I end up with 17. 17 cannot be broken down, so that's your final answer. Done. B, exact same concept, but minus 1 from both sides. I get 4x squared plus 4x minus 9 equals 0. So A is 4, B is also 4, C is negative 9. X equals, remember this is an empty set of parentheses, the opposite of B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I am not just using these I'm not just saying parentheses for like giggles. I literally use those in my calculator so I don't make sign mistakes. A is 4, goes next to the 4 and the 2. B, also 4, just a coincidence. It's not normal that those are always the same. And negative 9 goes in for C. X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root. I just leave it blank because I'm going to put the discriminant. Remember, that's the fancy math word for the stuff inside the radical. So I say left parentheses 4 squared minus 4 times negative 9. I end up with 160. 160 is not perfect, but 160 can be broken down. 160, 16 goes into 160 10 times. 4 also goes into it, but you'd have to do it multiple times. So you always want the biggest perfect square. So not that 4 is wrong, it's just not the best answer. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus this 16 turns into 4. 10 stays in jail forever, all over 8. Now the last thing I could do is all three of these can be divided by 4. So your absolute best answer is this. X equals negative 1 plus or minus 1 radical 10 all over 2. I wouldn't write the one right there, but some people will. So if you want the one there because it makes more sense to you, that's fine. That's it. Done. Over with.